and welcome to another week and another Huddle Breakdown. My name is Laura. I'm joined by James and Alan. As always, James, how you doing?
I'm good. It's good to see Alan back. This is where the dynamic duo is back together. So we're good.
Yep, Alan, you return. How are you feeling?
Yeah, okay. Just a bit of a setback, but no, all good in the long term. I'm sure. Just building back up to match fitness.
Well, at least you can tell the time for anybody who's maybe not fully aware. We had a little bit of a mix-up in the group chat trying to arrange this recording because obviously daylight savings time and the hour difference doesn't affect James across the water. What happened there, James?
What happened is this Neanderthal practice that started that is antithetical to modernity. These idiots think we're all farmers and still changing the damn clocks on me. And for some reason, you European people do it a week before us. And I even have the saying, spring forward, fall back. But to do the math as far as when is it go to from 5 to 6 hours difference to 4, I was confused. And
James, think of the poor little children in Canada that would otherwise have to go to school in the dark.
Yes, all poor children in Canada. Like I care about children in Canada, Alan. But anyway, yeah. So that was my excuse. Me just being a moron.
If it's any consolation to you, I had to drive home in the dark tonight. So that's the start of that particular cycle for the next 4 months or whatever it is. But yeah,
glorious, right?
Yep. Yeah.
For the 7 farmers left in Scotland. You're doing that for the 7 farmers left.
I have to say, Laura, in terms of, dangerous sports, that one's pretty low down the list, I would say. Well, you've not seen my driving, so... I had to commute from work, and it was a bit dark. Oh, wow, man.
Listen, like I said, you've not seen my driving, so we'll leave that hanging in the air as it is. Let's go on to other things. Let's talk Celtic. James, I'll come to you first. Obviously, a 3-0 victory over Motherwell at the weekend. I've seen a little bit of discussion around the performance and people sort of saying it was kind of run of the mill. We did what we had to do, nothing more, nothing less. Was that your impression of the game?
Yes. Sometimes consensus is pretty accurate. I suspect this is one of those circumstances. I think the data profile from the game when I looked at it and it, conformed with how I kind of digested the game as I watched, is we look like a tired team after a European midweek game. So if you look at like our rate of counter pressing and like how aggressive we were off the ball or when we lost the ball, I'm not saying we weren't trying, but it looked like we were tired. Like it was at a ratchet down from the levels what we typically are operating at. And some turnover in positions. I think maybe hopefully people started to understand the importance of Callum McGregor in that 6 role in a 4-3-3, particularly domestically. So I'm not saying Bernardo was terrible or anything, but McGregor has that ability to keep the ball progression ticking very efficiently. And that's not Bernardo's strength, as we've talked about repeatedly. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those games where 3-0, good, some positive fortune in the first half. Very easily could have been down 2-0, although the sequencing would have been different had Miller scored on the first one probably. But, so the first half was kind of grew into it a little bit in the second half, but still nothing stunning. And chalk it up. Let's move on. As I put in the chat in the Substack at the time, it's like the season is riddled with these kind of games every season, even in the best seasons, where you just got to grind it out, get a result, decent performance when you're, getting through these weeks with 2 to 3 games in a 7-8 day period, and you start piling them on top. This is kind of par for the course. So that's how I've been digesting it.
Yeah, I expressed similar concern before the match started about potential tiredness of certain players who played in Atalanta last week, and then also, that new combination of players in the middle of the park, which actually turned out, I think, to be slightly more effective in some ways than we thought they would be. Alan, I think the narrative is accurate, as James says, but it's just part of having a season with Champions League games and trying to keep going on all fronts, isn't it? That there are certain games at certain times that you're just going to have to grit your teeth and get through. And I know that sounds a bit negative considering we won 3-0, but I think the scoreline possibly flattered us a little bit.
Yeah, possibly. So I wouldn't attempt to characterize the performance in any other way as has been done. But what I would say is the game left me very happy, more than the performance maybe deserved because of the context of the game. To be off the back of a game where you're travelling, where you're defending for your lives on the edge of your box for your best part of 90 minutes, expending a lot of energy, trying to break when you can, etc., etc. It's not just the physical energy; it's the emotional energy as well, mental energy. Therefore, that makes the next game, especially when it's an away game against a team which is pretty well coached, has a plan, is having a reasonably solid season, has had a week to prepare for you. Yeah, there's a huge, in case you and Murray's watching, yes, there's a huge financial gulf between the squads. And yes, Celtic should win the game. However, we know, watching Scottish football for all these years, it doesn't always pan out that way. So I think, given in that context, I was very pleased with the outcome. And you're right in what you say. Was it flattering? Well, the XG, depending on who you look at, all the models are quite close in terms of there's no sort of great disparity in what I've seen. They're all, have Celtic about 1+1 XG differential, just about on the cusp of that. I think StatsBomb had it that Celtic should win 63% of the time, which just goes to show you if you're within that 1 xg 37% of the if you not pick up 3 points 37% of the time, how many of us would take those odds? You know what I mean? That's a bit hairy for me. I'd want that down at 15% or something like that before I would I'd feel comfortable. So the odds makers certainly thought it was a lot closer than 3-0 suggested. I think that what was sort of pleasing, maybe pleasing for Celtic but worrying for Motherwell, was that the opening goal came just off the back of their best phase of play, in terms of when they had the best momentum. And it's very unusual that it doesn't happen that often to score right as your opponent's having their best moments of the game. And that seemed to absolutely floor them, because they never really put together any attacking momentum until about the 80th minute, by which time, again, we scored that goal sort of 9 minutes into the second half, I think, which again just basically flattens any second half messages, any second half recalibrations on their side, and just kind of probably puts the game to bed. So in that sense, then you're then in the territory of can we just kind of quite calmly manage this game out? And I think that's what we did. So I was really satisfied with it. I really was. I think on the back of the European game, away from home, tricky opponent, bit of a focus on the title race, and great. Well, that's good. It's a little bit of pressure in that regard, although I don't think Brendan Rodgers would be troubling himself at this stage. Come and talk to me in January, maybe, in terms of if that's still a thing. So yeah, all in all, I think I was pretty happy with it.
Yeah, I think so. James, you mentioned him in your opening part, talking about the game, but a player who, despite the result, has been garnering a lot of discussion and a lot of headlines is Lennon Miller for Motherwell. I've seen everything from that we should have spent the money that we spent on Bernardo on him instead. I've seen suggestions that there's a ready-made replacement for Callum McGregor there, and I know any Motherwell fans who might happen to tune into this will be calling us extremely entitled to even be framing the discussion in that sort of way, but what's your impressions of him, given he's only 18 years old? He really does seem to have something a little bit different about him, doesn't he?
Yeah, I'm going to confess I have a spreadsheet shagging man crush on him. So yeah, for a just turned 18-year-old to be performing the way he is within the context of a Motherwell side that is not a possession dominant. They play a lot of long ball at times. They're kind of set piece oriented. We talked about that on, which, by the way, we stifled them. We completely shut down their set piece game, to our credit. Very good job. Coaching team probably in helping plan for that is my guess. But yeah, I just think he's a terrific young player. I think my benchmarking of him suggests that he might have strengths that aren't being utilized at Motherwell because of their style of play. Meaning that as he would move into a more attacking, possession dominant team, he might blossom more from a performance perspective because he's going to get the opportunity to do more stuff on the ball. So he's got some latent technical ability, I think, and also the one I always look for is flags for potential spatial intelligence and kind of game intelligence. When we've talked about the young Matt O'Reilly having those flags, I see kind of similar ones for him. Now he's, as Greg told us on Thursday on the show, on Extra Time, when we previewed Motherwell, that he had played a lot kind of deeper last season. And he's been pushed forward a little bit this season, which, again, from a development perspective, I think that's great. Like, put him in these different situations, let him learn. Just turned 18. So, you get into the, I think he would be unlikely to see Celtic as a natural development place to go to unless there was kind of an overt commitment that we're going to play him as a first team starter, because why would he? Like, he's good enough and talented enough that he needs to be playing and playing constantly, safely given his age and development. So, I'm not sure he suits box to box number 8 in our 4-3-3. And I don't think Engels or Bernardo do either. I mean, I've said that over and over again, but so would he be the replacement to Callum McGregor? Well, sure, maybe, but is he realistically going to displace him this season or next season? I would guess probably not. So if I'm Lennon Miller, why would I use that as my next career move when maybe you can go to Italy, or, you follow some of these paths that some of the other most talented Scottish players have followed. But yeah, I think he's terrific. I think he's one of these that has a confluence of skill set where he looks like he could really blossom. And I think a potential difference maker than the lazy comparison for him is David Turnbull. I think he's got evidence of some pretty decent athleticism, which was always Turnbull's kind of deficit, was on the quickness and pace side. So I'm not saying he's a barn burner, but I think he's more functional in those ways than Turnbull was as you kind of scale up to the European setting. So yeah, count me as a big fan.
Yeah, and we're just going to ignore you trying to talk down my boy David, because I just loved him. I did love him. I don't know if I have the spreadsheet to back it up, but I did love him. He's not pulling up trees at Cardiff as far as I'm aware, unfortunately, but there you go. That's the way of things. Alan, I actually appeared on another podcast, Don't Shoot Me, last night. How
dare you?
I know. What can I say? But there you go. And we were talking about it. So we had a Motherwell fan on, Aberdeen, Rangers, and myself in preparation for the League Cup semi-finals coming up at the weekend. And a lot of the discussion did centre around Lennon Miller. James touched on it there. The majority of the other people in the discussion, although yes, biased, were of the opinion, like James suggested there, that Celtic may not be a good career move for him, and somewhere like Italy, where Lewis Ferguson, Aaron Hickey and people like that have gone, might be a better option. Now, obviously, that's entirely up to him, but I guess my question is, do you think that's an indication of the kind of reputation Celtic have built over the years for maybe not having that pathway for young players to come through, either if they're signed externally or from within the academy?
I don't know. I mean, we've done the academy conversation to death in terms of the structural failings that are letting down all of the young kids that are coming through at all the clubs, actually. But this isn't that, because, as James says, he's actually a first-team player. So let's put to one side the fact he's 18, he's a first-team player. And, for me, I would Celtic, this is exactly the sort of player on our doorstep that Celtic should be bringing into the squad, saying, you're part of the first-team squad. I'm not saying you're starting every week, but like Luke McCowan, you're going to get significant minutes. And initially, you'll probably start the odd game initially, and if you're good enough, you'll keep your place, right? That's how I would position it. That honestly, how I would see it kind of panning out for a guy that's 18. Because to me, I look at first touch, I look at playing with your head up. His technical ability is very good. He's always going to have had a chance in Scotland because he's actually quite a big guy as well. He's not small. He's kind of stocky, and I think he's quite tall. I mean, I'm old-fashioned. I'd find a squad if I was coaching a youth team in Scotland. I'd find 16 kids that look like Gavi or Pedri or something, and just get them to hammer everybody by running around and passing the ball. But so I'm a bit old school in that regard. Yeah. So listen, and to James's point, the kid's 18, right? So in terms of, can he develop into a 6, an 8, a 10? Let's not worry about that. He's a good footballer, and good footballers can do different jobs. And he's young enough, and his brain's young enough to be taught different jobs. And if it's to be a number 8, which I think, given his athleticism, I'd love to see, and given his technical ability, I don't know what he's like in terms of his stamina and what have you. It's something which, obviously, as a young player, is probably going to be less than optimal at the moment, but something, again, which he can develop. I mean, even, no offense to Motherwell, but even even the difference between Celtic's sports science, just because of investment and facilities and all that, is going to be a bit of a leap forward for him. When it comes to Motherwell, etc. I mean, I think he got taken off at the weekend, but before that, he'd certainly completed 90 minutes in the 7 previous SPFL matches. So, yeah, listen, it's an absolute yes from me. Don't know what the kids' aspirations are like, James. You might be incredibly well advised, and you might end up with some really smart club in Italy or what have you. And fair play to him if that is the case. But I'd love to see him develop at Celtic.
Yeah,
and just to be clear, I would love that as well. I mean, that would be extend my man crush to make it more personal. That would be beautiful. But I was talking more so I could get from his perspective, and to Alan's point, why he may be getting advised otherwise, more so than, I mean, I would, I said it in the chat room, and I'm pretty serious about this. I think I have to think about it more, but I'd probably take him over Engels right now. Forget about Bernardo. That's how good I think he's going to be. I'm not saying he's as good as Engels right now. I'm saying that if you think like 18, 24, 36 months down, I think he probably has a higher ceiling. And I'm going to be really fascinated to see how much he goes for and what kind of clubs he goes to. He might even be priced out of Tony Bloom's new bankroll at Hearts, because I'm pretty sure Tony's going to be all over him if he can get him at the right price.
1.5 million in Yang and maybe a couple of Iron Brew bottles. That's our last offer. Oh no, those days are gone, right? Those days are gone. We don't do that. We don't do that anymore. Right?
Yeah, I did tweet something similar. I said the Celtic board are going to be haggling over 250,000 extra for him in no time. But let's hope we can be a bit more.
Laura, you're wedded to the past. Those days are gone.
I'm still bitter about John McGinn all these years later, but I'll get over it eventually, I'm sure. Alan, I'll come back to you on one of the other points that I think other people have been discussing in light of the Motherwell game, and that's the defence we ended up finishing the game with. I think from my rudimentary knowledge of football tactics, it looked like Scales ended up on the left with Trusty at left centre-back and Carter Vickers at right centre-back. My brother, who, I mean, you're welcome to guess at his football knowledge. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not so great, but he texted me immediately and said he felt like that was what he thought was Brendan Rodgers' preferred long-term back four. What's your thoughts on that?
Wow. Well, I mean, Scales if at 20, well, he's 26 nearly, so he's getting peak. So in terms of him learning a new role and a new position, it probably becomes more difficult for him, just in terms of football IQ and age and so forth. But he's probably, if you had to pick a favourite position for Scales, it would be left centre back in a three, which is not going to happen at Celtic. So left centre back's not that, it's close enough kind of thing. Trustree's actually played quite a bit of football as a left wing back and as a left-sided centre back in a three, which is preferred at Sheffield United, for example. So I was kind of surprised that it was Scales, not Trusty, that was put out to the left side. I would have thought Trusty, especially as Trusty's a lot quicker than Scales, that he would have been preferred as the left-sided defender. So that would kind of, it wasn't a major issue but it was just a little bit of a surprise. And because of game state and the fact how fat Celtic were well up at that point and control it was a kind of a low risk call, right? It was probably more of a risk just putting Carter Vickers on. And in fact, I think the first thing he had to do was really overextend his body to clear a ball within his box. I was just going, oh no. But listen, that's what you got to do. So yeah, that was a bit of a surprise. Is that the future? I don't know. I do like Alex Valle. I've not got the data. Sorry, I don't have the data yet on him. He's still, I think, a wee bit under my threshold. I think he's a bit raw still in many ways, but in terms of a modern fullback, in terms of his speed, aggression, his on ball, his technical ability, he seems to be able to interpret space going forward, fill little holes in midfield quite well. I like all that. It's not something I could really see Trusty or Scales doing, if I'm honest with you. So I think the demands of a Celtic left back are more around that sort of football IQ, that positioning, that movement that we see so regularly with Greg Taylor, who's really well honed now in the demands of his job. But if you had the Greg Taylor and you had Trusty's physique and physical speed, that would be the absolute perfect left back. But then, as I say, he'd probably be at Arsenal.
Yeah,
said that deliberately, by the
way. Yeah, I had a similar conversation with somebody the other day saying the same thing about Carter Vickers. He might be elsewhere if it wasn't for his injury record. I think that's the very thing that allows us to have him. James, it's a strange one because we have this situation where we have a few players who can play in a few different positions along the defence, and when they're all fit, there are options there. Alan said it was a bit surprising to see us finish the game in the way that we did. What do you think was the reason for that? Is it like Alan says, we were just in a kind of comfortable position, or was Rodgers, do you think, trying to see something, if you want to use that phrase?
My speculation would be that because of the timeline of Trusty's arrival, that it's plausible he hasn't really been drilled at left back much because he's had to figure out how to play as a right-sided center back in our system. And that Scales probably, just for depth reasons, had probably had some exposure and training at playing left back. So that's my guess, kind of just a practicality of timeline and like, where the hell am I going type of thing, that Scales would have some sense, whereas I would think Trusty maybe hasn't been exposed in training. I think that's, maybe the most plausible, simple answer. Because I agree with Alan. Like, if I was going to pick between the two, if I had to put one at left back, I'd probably pick Trusty. But I'm similar in, viewing it as a emergency situation, or one of these situations like it was on the weekend where we're up so much and comfortable late that we don't have anyone else to play there. So in Valle, for whatever reason, maybe needed to come off because he put quite a shift in during the weekend in Bergamo. So I suspect that's the answer.
Sorry, just to jump in, I've rarely seen a team be so incredibly one-sided in how they've tried to progress the ball as Motherwell will on Sunday. It's like they virtually never attempted a pass down Celtic's right-hand side. Everything went down the left-hand side. Everything.
Into the coffin corner.
And we've talked about this, right? more so with Scales and the sort of Scales, Taylor, Hitati kind of axis is not the most defensively robust, let's say, or hasn't been. Although I think Scales is clearly, by any measures, having a very good season. Valle is, I think, he looks pretty. He's going to have the recovery speed, even if he screws up positionally. He's got the recovery speed that Taylor doesn't have, and so I don't know whether I don't suspect it was Rodgers shoring up that side, because literally everything was going down. Almost like to a comical. If you see the pass network, it's almost comedic. I can't share it with you because it's a stats bomb one, but yeah. So I just throw that in because it just amused me, and I'm not saying that's the reason that they beefed up that side. But it would be funny if it was.
Alan, I'm just going to slightly touch on this because I know it's not the type of thing that we normally cover in the podcast, but given your regular contact with the Yorkshire Whistler, I did want to talk to you a little bit about the discussion around that tackle on Adam Ida and the outright denial from Stuart Kettlewell that he would have in any way been crying out for a red card. I mean, VAR did its job there, absolutely, but I mean, there can be no denial about the decision and the outcome of it, can there? Is that just Mr. Kettlewell protecting his players, so to say?
I guess so. I don't know if that now means that player doesn't play in the semi-final, and he's just doing everything he can to try and mitigate that, or any chance he's got of having that cancelled. But no, it was a shocking looking challenge. In all honesty, I think it was an honest attempt to get the ball. He was just too slow, and it ended up having potentially a bad concept. Well, it might be. I don't know. Ida apparently was in a boot. I mean, his ankle took a hell of a roll. There will be swelling there.
I think he's getting scans today as well.
The swelling goes down a bit. Mm. Yeah, you'll need the swelling to go down, and you need to have a scan and all that. So I'd be very surprised if we see Ida on midweek tomorrow, really Wednesday. So it was a bad outcome, but I genuinely don't think the guy was setting out to get him. It was just it's just one of these football things that happens in the speed, and it was absolutely no doubt about it in my mind a red card. I'll defer to the Yorkshire Whistler to give the technical wording around why it was a red card.
Yeah, not quite the same viciousness in it as the tackle that Matt O'Reilly suffered on his Brighton debut. I'll give him that. It was a more honest attempt to get the ball, but the outcome is potentially grim nonetheless. We'll see. Using that cue though, Alan, as you say, talking about expectations for Wednesday, we'll move on to the midweek game against Dundee, which at the time of recording is just over 24 hours away. James, a strange one in terms of the fact that we do have the semi-final on Saturday, and that potentially will in some way sort of inform how we approach tomorrow's game and how selections go. What are you expecting to see from us tomorrow as we come up against Dundee at home?
Yeah, I think that's you raised the most important points. I mean, I'd be shocked. I mean, Ida's going to be out. I mean, you don't roll your ankle like that and have the swelling and bounce back. So, I'd be shocked if he makes the weekend too. As someone who's dealt with that kind of ankle rolling injury at one point in my youthful career, even when you're younger, you don't bounce back from that kind of roll in could be a couple weeks at least. So, yeah, I think whether McGregor's back, Rodgers sounded squishy on him, so why would you risk him? Again, home to Dundee. If we can't use our squad depth here, when can you? So why would you risk him, kind of thing. Same with Carter Vickers. Like maybe he starts and then you play him first half or something, but manage his minutes to be smart and not jeopardize any recurrence or longer term issues. So yeah, I suspect because of those issues, they'll be relatively conservative because it's going to be a big game on Saturday. I mean, it's going to be interesting. Aberdeen are going to be tested the first way that they have. I mean, for them to play Rangers tomorrow or Wednesday and then, bounce back to have to play us in a cup semi within 3 days. I mean, that's a big ask for them. So, we should be loaded for bear, I would think. I mean, we should be optimizing for Saturday, particularly given the recent game. So, yeah, that's what I would think, but we'll see. I mean, Rodgers has been surprising sometimes with his selections over the years with injured player profiles. So I'll be interested to see what it is. But to me, it should be relatively straightforward.
Yeah, Alan, I think James touched on it there, but it's almost going to be a little bit more predictable in terms of what the selections are likely to be because we already have a couple of injuries there. I think, as James said, we would have been looking to lean on the squad as a whole for the game on Wednesday. Are you expecting any particular surprises, any appearances that we might not otherwise expect, or is it going to be much of a muchness from the weekend?
I'll be interested to see how they cover the striker position. That's the one thing I'd be fascinated to know, given the lack of bodies that we have in that role. Whether it's even Maeda really does a sort of dual switch with Kyogo maybe over the 90 minutes to fill that role. But otherwise, no, I think it'll be really with a view to managing, hopefully, with managing people that are maybe not, a bit, like Taylor and Carter Vickers and so forth, Ida, that. And we've got all these Champions League games coming up, and it's all to play for. So that's and the semi-final. So that's really the immediate kind of focus area. So home game against Dundee should be an opportunity to pick a team that is risk averse as it can be from a sort of welfare perspective. Dundee are an interesting side. They actually for all that they actually generate quite a lot of good attacking output. Now the results kind of definitely took a hit when McCowan left them. He was their heartbeat, really. They've only just won at Motherwell. It was the first game they won after McCowan left. But even at both ends though, they're pretty good at generating generating chances. Are pretty good at keeping the opposition keeper busy. But at the same time, it's also the same at their end, and they're very perceptible to counterattacks, and they don't respond well to being high pressed. So I think there's a lot of joy for Celtic to be had from this game. Dundee may well nick a goal or two, but I think Celtic will have lots of chances in this game.
Yeah, I'm hoping so, and I hope we can obviously put some of those away and settle the game pretty quickly. James, just to close out the show, let's look a little bit ahead to that semi-final at the weekend. I'm sure you guys will cover it in more detail in the later show this week. We've talked about the way in which Aberdeen's game against Rangers tomorrow might affect their performance on Saturday, but looking at Celtic initially, what do you think we need to do to avoid the kind of second half that we had against them at Celtic Park? I was thinking back on that game and I couldn't put my finger on exactly why what happened, whether it was just a lack of concentration from us or some sort of fatigue setting in. But is that something that do you think we'll have learned from and will hopefully avoid on Saturday?
Yeah, I think it's easy to extrapolate things that weren't there. Meaning that I think that, we talked about this after the game, that they're, play that game 100 times type of thing. We might only lose it once or draw it once or even lose it once. And so I don't think there's a lot of adjustments that need to be made. Maybe some tweaks here and there. I suspect, and this is, again, depends on how they prioritize tomorrow versus the weekend. But if they were to set up to maybe be a little more front-footed with some pace, that kind of thing, I could see them going that route given what they were able to do, and then kind of flip the script, maybe do that early and then get more defensive kind of thing. I don't see a lot of shifts in what we're going to do. So I wish I had a more exciting answer. I have a more exciting follow-up on Dundee, though.
Go for it.
I didn't get a chance to say it, so I'll say it quick. I'll say it quick. Is this is the most fascinating one? I love when I find one of the domestic teams that have real weirdness in their profile when they shift. And as you would expect, or I think one would expect, I would expect, this is why it was so surprising when I looked to see this, is that Dundee are usually a pretty good set piece team, at least on an attacking basis. So, for example, last season, given their size or resources and competitive standing in the league, they were about, even on set piece chances created and conceded. And they have completely imploded on that this season to the point where, their overall XG hasn't shifted that much, but it's swung completely from set piece into open play. So I think if they sort out their set piece stuff, and I don't follow them close enough. I don't know if they've had, other than McCown, I can't imagine he would be, other than maybe deliveries, but as far as, because it's their defending that's also not been great. So I don't think their physical composition shifted that much. But and this is the oddity. This is the real, when you get into the real nuance oddity, it's throw-ins that they're conceding. So they've really been bad at defending their box. So I don't think that really applies to us, because we're not going to be taking long throw-ins, to my knowledge, unless we all of a sudden shake things up in a completely unexpected way at home to Dundee against Dundee.
That 6'9" striker that's in the B team. Have you not heard of?
Right. Bring him on as a specialist just to do throw-ins.
And shout Schmeichel up to take
maybe
all
has
the
long
throw-ins.
arms. Right. Something weird. Yeah, I'd be all for it. I mean, bring it on, I say. But so yeah, I actually think, so when I distill all this down, I specifically against us, I think their current iteration probably presents a little bit on the margin. I always qualify this, on the margin. They probably pose a little bit more of a threat to us than the broader statistics would suggest. Because I think the way that the composition of them and how they're playing and their relative strengths and weaknesses probably match up a little better than what those overall numbers indicate. Still should be something comfortable. God forbid if they do figure out their set piece issues. I think they've conceded something like 4 or 5 set piece goals and haven't scored on a set piece yet, which again, for a team like Dundee, like that's, really weird. So, in my constant state of paranoia, that means they're due against us. Even though there's absolutely no analytical rigor to that viewpoint. But yeah, I just want to throw that out there, because there's not many times when you see a team have throw-ins become like the focal point of why they're conceding goals, defending throw-ins, long throw-ins. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
That is interesting. That's definitely not something I think I would have picked up going over the numbers like that. But it's, if we can suddenly find, like Alan says, a 6'9" striker and somebody who can launch a ball in, like Rory Delap, then that would be ideal. Alan, just to go back to the cup semi-final that I was talking to James about initially, I guess my question to you would be, what are the chances of us entertaining a game in a cup final as at Celtic Park? Do you think the approach of either team is going to change just because of the nature of the fixture, or are they just going to go for it the way that they did at Celtic Park?
Are you talking about Aberdeen in the semi-final?
Aberdeen, I would assume Celtic will take their usual lead, but yes, will Aberdeen give it as good a go as they did?
Yeah, I think it will be notched up, as James says. I think what they learned was, if they got speed on the pitch and hit those early passes from inside left, especially inside right, McGrath, etc. Get the ball to him, and then almost first time it through the middle against Celtic's high line. And depending on who's in defence, we're not always the quickest with facing our own goal. that would probably be the way to go. So I think they'll be front foot in that regard. I mean, Aberdeen do try and keep the ball, but then it suddenly goes forward very quickly. They'll sort of be pass, not going anywhere, and then bang, and they'll try and find a moment. I suppose a bit like the reverse of pressing. They'll look for a trigger in the defensive alignment that means that someone's maybe got on the right side of somebody's shoulder. Mainly probably Keskinen or Duke or what have you, because they're both quite quick players in the wide areas. So I don't think they'll change. But I'd agree with James, and it was actually, to be fair, I think it was Paul Brennan on CQN in his piece today that pointed out that Aberdeen have not played 2 games in a week this season at all, and to have what is going to be a very emotional game against the Rangers on Wednesday. It's going to be very physical with the crowd, it's under the lights, all of that. Hopefully it's blowing a gale and it's typical Aberdeen weather, and it's just a real fight. I think they'll. I would expect them to get something from that game, maybe a draw, but certainly I'd expect them to get something from that game, because I think the way that the Rangers, given the way that they're set up, are really susceptible to those quick transitional balls. I mean, they really are, and their central defenders are very slow. So, I think Aberdeen can be encouraged by that. But I think it'll be a very physically and emotionally draining match for them, and then to go to a semi-final in Glasgow against Celtic, who, I think, as we've said all along, Celtic play in a very calm, controlled manner. You're not going to, Wednesday might be more exciting than we think. I mean, James is right. I mean, if you look at Dundee, they are interesting. I'm not going to list loads of stats at you, but if you look at all the different kind of team level attributes of each side this season, Dundee are rarely in the middle. They're usually one extreme or the other. They're quite an interesting team, really. So, and actually, my observation, sort of non-statistical observation, is they tend to be very good or really, really bad, depending. So I think the odds of them pulling it off at Celtic Park are probably low, if I'm being honest. But so I think Celtic, what's what I'm saying, A, we're used to playing 2 games in a week, no issue. And B, I think we'll set up in a way that's optimising the squad with a view to managing for the week ahead. And therefore, I just think physically that semi-final for Aberdeen is going to be a real test for them.
Yeah, I'm away to consider tonight whether the last minute offer of a ticket for the game tomorrow night is worth it, or whether it's going to be one of those Wednesday night slogs that you wish you were sitting in your living room watching it. So who knows? I'm sure you'll hear from me if I do manage to make it to Celtic Park tomorrow night. James, it might be the first time Aberdeen have done 2 fixtures in a week. It is not the first time Huddle Breakdown have done 2 fixtures in a week. So what can we expect from you guys towards the end of the week on Friday?
Yeah, we're going to just dive in and review the performance from Wednesday, and then circle back to really take a close look. Probably review the Rangers Aberdeen game, to be honest with you, because that is the premier fixture of the day tomorrow, for a variety of reasons, and because it's so directly impactful on Celtic for the weekend. We'll probably take a close look at that as part of previewing the semifinal.
Yeah, absolutely, and I look forward to hearing that, because if I am at home, I'm tossing a coin between whether I'm actually going to watch your game or their game, because I might have one on one screen and one on another, and do it that way. I'm too tempted.
Yeah,
that's the way to go.
Yes, but thank you very much, guys. We're going to keep it tight today. We have places to be, things to do. James, Alan, thank you very much for joining me this week, and we will see you all again on Friday.